Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing great, thank you very much, and I'm so delighted to be able to join you for a lovely, fabulous story, because nothing beats a good story. So before we get started, go and get yourself that lovely glass of drink, whether it's something hot and nourishing like hot chocolate, or whether it's something refreshing and effervescent. Go and get it, and if it's something unusual, let me know about it. So before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, I'm trying to suppress my laughter. Really, I am. But it's an internal tug-of-war, a battle with my zygomatic facial muscles that is so easily defeated. I can't help myself. Despite my restraint, my muscles around my mouth loosen, the corners of my lips twitch, collapsing under the pulling pressure, gliding upwards like a piece of elastic band being stretched to full capacity. Then, despite my very best efforts to remain stoically indifferent, a huge amused grin has burst forward on my face, like the sunshine on a cloudy day. Worse still, an offensive snort, followed by a cacophony of cocky laughter, discharges itself from the back of my throat impromptu. Whoops, I certainly didn't mean that to happen. It makes me appear arrogantly rude. I know it does. Condescending even. The estate agent is frowning up at me. She's putting her hands on her hips in a defiant, defensive gesture. Can't say I blame her, really. I've only gone and laughed in her face, and that never is received well at the very best of times, especially not from a woman who is profoundly serious, like she clearly is. I imagine she would privately relegate me to the list of her most obnoxious, discourteous clients that she's encountered over the years. But I'm not intentionally, audaciously ill-mannered as a person. On the contrary, I consider myself to be quite a gentleman, really. I know my unbridled laughter has caused offence, but I mean, what this woman is spouting through her blowhole like a beluga whale basking in the ocean is all but a bunch of baloney. Is she really expecting me to take a word of what she's saying seriously? Are you kidding me? Indeed, the way she's talking is so ludicrously preposterous and insanely farcical. I can't help myself but be amused. I mean, does she really believe I'm going to buy into all this hocus-pocus stuff and nonsense? How old does she think I am? 38 going on 5? I grew out of fairy tales a long time ago, I assure you. I'm a pragmatic, level-headed, logical man, with my feet firmly embedded on the ground. I'm closing in my late 30s, for goodness sake. Does she really expect me to believe this nonsensical mumbo-jumbo? It would seem so, judging by the reproachful, reproving expression on her face. You think this is terribly funny, Mr. Warrington? I can see that, she says, looking at me through her steely, disparaging blue eyes that don't suffer fools gladly. She's clearly been an estate agent for a long period of time. She thinks she's sussed me out like all of her other clients, but no, she has not. I can see she's a tough old bird. I say old as even though she's middle-aged, with a short crop of blonde hair, done in a stylish shaggy pixie cut, with a plethora of layers to enhance its fullness. I discern she has a slender physique, tightly tucked away behind a modest formal black pantsuit. I think the years have robbed her of some of her youth, as her features are now hardened, angular, rather sharp, as the buoyant fullness of her cheeks has clearly been punctured like a beach ball, so her flattened skin now clings tightly to her face. There's pronounced frown lines in the middle of her eyebrows, along with a few crow's feet dappling the edges of her blue eyes, but those are not unattractive. They show me she's lived. She was terribly pretty once, I think. Not any more, although she is attractive, of course, but I imagine it's probably customers like myself that, like the cantankerous ocean waves, have beat against her incessantly with all their challenging demands. It can take a lot out of a person, you know. Let's not kid. Life can be very taxing. We all know that. Some people can quite literally drain you of all your energy. I've seen it in my line of work all the time. My mother used to call them energy vampires. You'll spend time with them, and then once they've gone, you're so exhausted, so incredibly drained. I hope I'm not doing that to this poor woman's energy. I clandestinely suspect that I may be doing just that, which is the last thing I want to do. But does she really expect me to take her seriously? I battle my amused expression by banishing it as quickly as I can from my face, wearing now what I hope is a serious, sombre expression, which is much more agreeable to her. I'm only telling you this, Mr. Warrington, as I have your best interests at heart, as this house has been through over 20 owners in the last 10 years. Now that's not good. People move in here, and sometimes 3 or 4 months later, they just sell up like that. Now I know it's a beautiful home. People are always fighting to buy it. It's very easy to sell a person a house like this because you fall in love with it so easily. It has historic integrity, charm, character. But once people move into this house, they're all too eager to escape. I have to warn you, it is definitely haunted. And whether you believe it or not, it's true. I've interviewed some of the former owners of this place, and they have all reported very disturbing activity, which unsettled them greatly. They had to move away. Many describe encountering a malevolent, bodeful, dark energy, telling them to get the hell out of the house. It scares the bejesus out of them, as you can fully appreciate. She hesitates for a brief moment, almost as if to gauge my reaction, but my impassioned expression remains very fixed, without a glimmer of amusement on my face. So, encouraged by my more respectful demeanour, she continues, "People are never comfortable with what they don't understand. I'm only mentioning this to you, Mr. Warrington, as you referred to your wife as being pregnant, and you also have a young 4-year-old girl, who I'm sure is obsequiously impressionable and easily exploitable, certainly by dark energy she would be. At that young age they can see into other realms. It's a proven fact. I'm not sure this is an appropriate house for raising a young family. I mean, if your wife is pregnant, this is indeed a vulnerable time for her, especially with a baby growing in her womb. In my opinion, she needs to be in a secure, safe place, where she's not exposed to these treacherous supernatural stresses. If you take my advice, you will allow me to take you to view some other houses on my listings, Mr. Warrington, that will be much more suitable for your family's needs. Now, if it's a historic property you're looking for, there is one not far from here. It's the real deal, a fabulous colonial. You'll just love it." "I'm very sorry, Miss Ferris. I know you mean well," I say, raising my hand to stop her yapping on and on about a house I certainly don't want. "I've decided that this is the house I want. I think this house has stolen all the thunder from its competitors, and I'm sold on the place. As I keep saying, I know your heart is in the right place, and I certainly appreciate your very great kindness. But the moment I laid my eyes on this place, I knew it was the one for me and my family, and I'm rather sold on it." "I was worried you were going to say that," says the estate agent, frowning at me. "Do you know, Mr. Warrington, I have to beat people off buying this place, and I do get why they love it so much. It oozes charm. But I don't want you to regret this decision of yours, and I am very concerned about your wife." "Don't you worry about me, Miss Ferris. I'm old and ugly enough to manage my mistakes, when and if I should make them. I don't think this property is a mistake, although I will confess I have made many mistakes over my life." "But aren't you a teensy-weensy bit worried about the high turnover of people that have bought this house? I mean, surely you can perceive that this is more than a coincidence, Mr. Warrington. It's clear to me you don't buy into the idea of this place being haunted, but does it not give you a pause for thought that so many people abandoned this place after only a few months of living here? People like you, who fell in love with the place and couldn't get away fast enough after they'd bought it." "No, it doesn't, Miss Ferris. I'm not other people. I can't speak for them or for their actions, but I can for mine, and so I would like to put an offer in for the house if I may. I might remind you it's your job to encourage people to buy houses, not to turn them away." "Look, Mr. Warrington, I can see your heart is so sold on the place, but don't you dare come crying to me or complaining if it all goes south," says Miss Ferris in a no-nonsense schoolmistress-like voice. "I just like people to know exactly what they're getting into, that's all, so there are no nasty surprises along the way. I wouldn't be doing my job properly if I didn't warn you. The estate agent, Miss Ferris, stands outside her Nissan truck, watching me through her large, glamorous Gucci sunglasses. I climb warily back into my car, my back gratefully sinking into the soft leather seats. I slam the door gently behind me, feeling the estate agent's eyes fixed on me like a beady hawk. If she doesn't know it, she's shaking her head rather profusely. I imagine she thinks I'm a bloody fool for not taking her judicious advice seriously. But I am no fool. I never make impromptu decisions without thinking about them studiously and weighing all the options in my mind. As far as I was concerned, there was no sense of foreboding or dark energy in that house that I could discern. I didn't pick up any ethereal, spooky, ghostly or outer-worldly presence in the house. On the contrary, the house was warm, convivial, inviting, uplifting, and very welcoming. I sigh warily as I tune into Z100 radio, as dealing with Miss Ferris was literally like persevering with an unwanted flapping pigeon that you're trying desperately to evacuate from the house. An irritant, not to put too fine a point on it. I plunge the key into the lock, switch on the engine of my car, and wave at Miss Ferris, while driving away with my hand steering the car away smoothly down the undulating driveway. I can see Miss Ferris through my rear-view mirror. Her brow is furrowed, her face wearing a frown. I reflect over my conversation with her. I hasten to say this has got to be the most peculiar interaction that I've ever had with an estate agent before, where I literally had to fight for the property that I wanted to buy. And hello, I am actually the customer, in case the woman has forgotten. Has she deserted the age-old rule that the customer is always right, and what the customer wants, the customer gets? Or had that conveniently just bypassed her mind? Somehow I suspected it had. I was now driving back to Portland. The dream house I had put an offer on was situated close to the Columbia River Gorge, not far from the rural small towns of Hood River and the Dales. Currently my family was living in an attractive apartment in the Pearl District that was masterfully transformed from an old warehouse into a loft conversion by an up-and-coming, very successful architect. It was located in a fabulous area, and don't get me wrong, me and my wife thoroughly enjoyed living there. I've always loved a place to bear the indelible footprints of bygone times, like slippers worn from the past. The Pearl District in Portland definitely does bear the hallmarks of a rich, very vibrant history. Sometimes if I close my eyes tightly enough, I can see men from a long-forgotten generation, literally walking down those streets, in their full-skirted knee-length coats, breeches, waistcoats, while sporting debonair, elegant but classic top hats on their heads, while the women boast a glamorous ensemble of corsets, bustle skirts and bonnets, all made out of exquisite-looking fabrics. I can even visualize the horse and buggies meandering down the bumpy contours of the street in the 1800s. Ironically, I have friends here in the Pearl District that swear they sometimes wake up in the middle of the night or the early hours of the morning to hear horses' hooves trotting down the cobblestones at the most nonsensical hours, and these friends of mine are not inclined to be delusional, so the echoes of the past can be clearly felt by all who live here. The Pearl District used to be the warehouse district, with loading docks and cobblestone streets. It was known as the Industrial Triangle, with shunting yards and weather-beaten buildings. Nowadays, these industrial buildings have been converted into trendy shops, chic lofts, artisan coffee shops, fine dining, and fabulous boutiques. My wife would have accompanied me today to observe this countryside property, but her morning sickness was out of control, so we decided it was better that she stayed at home with our 4-year-old daughter Sophie. My wife was only 5 months pregnant, and this morning sickness had dominated her entire pregnancy to date, and it looked like it was here to stay through the entire course of her pregnancy, like the proverbial boomerang. Ironically, when my wife was pregnant with Sophie, she had breezed through that pregnancy so seamlessly, like a sailboat on calm waters, without a hint of turbulence. Everything in that pregnancy had been so easy, almost too easy. Now it was almost as if her body had mercilessly saved up all its wrath for this pregnancy. By all accounts, my wife was now rarely suffering, with vindictive, cruel bouts of morning sickness that held her hostage to her own self-induced incarceration, as leaving home, even for a spate of grocery shopping, was not even an option for her, as any bumpy movements caused by travel would have my wife hurling up her guts. By all accounts, it was left up to me to manage the affairs of the home front as well as the office, and help us to find an ideal location to live, as my wife was worn out, frazzled, exhausted, and perpetually nauseous. I'd never seen her look so washed out, so pale, so tired. Some people described her as a walking zombie. They weren't far wrong. We had decided we wanted to move outside the Pearl District, to a countrified, tranquil location, where we could raise our children in a wholesome, rustic, more rural environment, where Mother Nature could also provide some nurturing maternal sustenance to them. I certainly loved the idea of being able to see the billowing curvatures of the mountains gliding up so graciously into the skyline every morning, under the canopy of a cobalt blue sky, along with the surrounding rugged sculptural terrain, where jagged rocks angrily jutted out of the landscape, littered with Douglas firs and eastern hemlocks, while sword ferns, rhododendrons, Oregon grape, and twin flowers would scatter themselves liberally under the forest canopy. I could commute to the city a couple of days a week, although fortunately much of my work could be done from home, online, with conference calls and so forth. This was the quintessential, brand new start in life that my family needed. I had grown up near the gateway of the Ozarks, so for me I felt my children should be raised close to the natural world. As for me personally, growing up so close to nature had deeply enriched my life, as breathing in all that crisp country air, exploring the natural environment while drinking in awe-inspiring views had been such a pleasure, one that I didn't want to deprive my own children of in the crucial stages of their development. These days, of course, with the advent of social media platforms like WhatsApp and Twitter, many kids are almost superglued to their cell phones, and for me personally, I thought this was no way for them to live. Technology has its advantages and place, but certainly when it consumes and robs your life, like a blood-sucking leech or time-sucking vampire, it is definitely not a good thing. If my children needed anything in life, it was not to be wholly dependent on technology, as there is indeed life beyond the airwaves. When I'd laid my eyes upon Willow Creek House, I had fallen in love with the location at once. Large iron gates opened up to a long asphalt driveway that led towards the most beguiling symmetrical farmhouse that I'd ever seen, where roses tumbled like laughter over the front entrance of the home. I was to learn that the original 1800s farmhouse that had stood on this prime location had been in such a bad state of repair. It had been subsequently demolished about 25 years ago, but a fine architect had recreated the old building and revived the history of the home, using quality materials to reproduce an almost identical copy of the original farmhouse. Let's just say it seemed to be marinated in a rich, vibrant history, as if it had been resurrected from the grave itself and brought back to life again, which had been the general idea of the original builder. The whitewashed classical farmhouse was long and square, with several arched sash windows on the upper and lower elevations, a very ornate black shiny door, a black slate roof, with a wraparound porch that snuggled itself cosily around the house, like a very large, effusive hug. It sounds pretty mainstream, I know, and rather bland as I describe it, but in reality the house was absolutely gorgeous. It would easily stand out in any crowd. It had a life of its own. It breathed personality, oozed charm like dribbling honey, character like a sweet flowery bouquet, and was congenial like a sincere, warm-hearted friend. It seemed wizened and mature, like a Californian redwood tree that has bounded through the generations like a buoyant rubber ball and seen so much, too much perhaps. Maybe that was why I was so attracted to this gorgeous house. I loved places that had a nostalgic, wistful, flamboyant, palpable history, which was why I was drawn to living in the Pearl District in the first place. I loved how the house was nestled so comfortably in the heart of a prepossessing, verdant, hilly valley, surrounded by pretty meadows, sculptural, rugged outcrops, a plethora of trees that sprawled out into a large, arresting woodgrove, where there was a babbling creek, sporting its own wrought-iron, highly ornate white bridge. If that wasn't enough for you, The farmhouse boasted some very accommodating outbuildings, which included a substantial red barn and a stable block, a faint suggestion, or subtle insinuation perhaps, that at one time we might consider buying a couple of American quarterback horses, which was definitely on the cards in the not-too-distant future. I decided I would not mention to my wife Morag about the estate agent's nonsensical claims that the house was haunted. I decided to leave those abstract, ethereal, and insubstantial things left unsaid, as the last thing I wanted to do was to put a spanner in the works and cause my wife unwarranted upset, which she didn't need in her pregnancy, as it could have expendable ramifications for the baby growing in her womb. My wife believed in ghosts and things that go bump in the night, although she'd never been exposed to any paranormal activity. But she was intuitive and much more spiritually inclined than I was. My wife Morag's account. The first time I laid my dewy, rather sentimental eyes on Willow Creek House, let's just say I felt as if I was transported back in time to the 1800s, even though this house, I was told, had replaced the original farmhouse that had once stood on this exact piece of land, but had been bulldozed as it was in a bad state of repair. In truth, it looked so legitimate that if you'd told me it was the original farmhouse, I would have absolutely believed you. There was nothing about this house that led me to believe it had been recently built, apart from one predominant factor, of course, and that was it was in remarkably good condition, with not the wear and tear or inevitable problems you would expect to arise in a more older home that constantly demands maintenance to keep it in tip-top condition. Suffice to say, the house was pure poetry, or a romantic, evocative song, if you like. It looked as if it had always been nestled there, comfortably in the valley, for 300 years and beyond. It looked like it belonged. Yes, I think that's an excellent word for me to use. This dreamy house belonged to the environment, like a purse belongs with a pair of matching shoes. The house had relaxed roots that anchored themselves securely and comfortably in the ground. It didn't look like your standard run-of-the-mill symmetrical building. This house was uniquely special. It was alive. I loved the billowing trail of red roses that clung to the outer front wall of the house, bespeckling the walls with their delicate, ethereal, perfumed blossoms. I felt as if the house was wrapping me in her arms with such a warm welcome. It felt like home. That's right. It felt like home. If I'm laying my cards on the table and baring my heart to you and being blatantly honest, I would tell you that my husband surprised me. I would never have envisaged him capable of picking out a dream property like this for us, but he did, and furthermore he excelled himself in the process. Let's just say at the time I was far too sickly to actually care about where the hell we actually lived. My morning sickness had crippled my life, holding me to ransom, to an inactive, lackadaisical lifestyle spent on the couch. I don't believe I could have done better myself in selecting a more promising home for our family. This reassuring house was like a charmed fairy tale, with viridescent green meadows spread out from beyond the property, where the knee-high grass danced against a still breeze, fringed in the furthest distance by the towering vertical silhouettes of the ponderosa pines and Douglas fir trees. The light of the sun caressed its shadows on the house with a twinkling, vibrant warmth. It was so beautiful, and yes, I admit I was transfixed by the house. My little daughter Sophie was running around the property, her ebullient face a picture of joy. "Mummy, I love this house! This is the best place to play with my dolls! Look, Molly, Mummy, she says that this is the best new home. This is our new home, Mummy. Molly's just told me she loves our house. But she thinks you must buy me a horsey." "Does she now?" I say, smiling down at Sophie. "Well, we'll see about that, sweetheart," I say affectionately, ruffling her curly blonde ringlets that frame her cute baby face affectionately. When I enter the house, I gasp in astonishment. The movers have been and gone. My husband was such a gem, so attentively thoughtful. He hired a team of conscientious, industrious people to map out the furniture all around the property, so I didn't have to do a thing or lift a finger, as even the boxes dropped off by the delivery men have been punctiliously and painstakingly unpacked and put away, with an assiduous attention to detail. My husband knew I'd been through hell and back during this pregnancy, and wanted to make this move as stress-free as possible, and he succeeded. In truth, it had all been so exhausting. Well, my pregnancy, that is. They always say that women blossom through their pregnancy. Please give me a break. Do they say that to make us pregnant women feel better? Because if they do, it's not working. I just don't buy into that theory, not for a single moment. Maybe some people do, but it never happened to me. In truth, I feel like a hippopotamus, and when people ask me if they can feel my belly, I cringe in horror, not because I care about them touching my belly, but it's during these moments I'm always reminded of how enormous I have become. When I look at myself in the mirror, it seems impossible to believe that I could ever be my pre-birth size and weight again. My former slenderness has abandoned and deserted me like a bird on the wind, and my fat cells are literally throwing parties like rambunctious squirrels storing away a plethora of nuts for a rainy day, instructing my fat cells to store, and store. I tried to put my jeans on the other day, and my heart sank. I could barely get them up my legs. It was heartbreaking. It's not even as if I've eaten very much during this pregnancy, as I've been throwing up most of the time. But still my body is laying down fat stores, as if insulating the house for winter. By the way my body is looking at the moment, I would hazard a guess that my fat cells have clearly decided that it will be a very icy cold winter indeed, which means more and more insulation is clearly needed and invited to generously layer itself around my body. Just lovely. It's all I need. Of course my husband tells me I look wonderful, but then he's been a perfect charmer, has he not? And I suppose his generous lies cushion the blow of how rarely bad I do look. Needless to say, he has redeemed himself somewhat by buying this house for us. And all I need to do now is lift up my feet, as my husband has taken away all the back-breaking work for me. Things would be wonderful if my pregnancy wasn't so tumultuous, but it really is a troubling pregnancy. It was after being in the house for a few days that strange, rather enigmatic things began to happen. I kept reassuring myself that my brain had become filled with hot air or cauliflower, and my memory become like a sieve. Don't you worry, yes, I've heard all about pregnancy brain. I mean, not only does your body become like a hippo, but your brain becomes all flaky and unreliable. That's all we need. I would put my car keys on the entrance hall desk, only to find them in my purse a while later, and I knew I'd put them on the desk. So why were they in my purse? I had no recollection of putting them there. I would return to my bedroom, wondering why my bed covers had been straightened, when moments before they were ruffled. I would smell violets in the bedroom on many occasions. It was bizarre. I didn't have a fragrance like that. I even began to ask myself if the brand of washing powder that I was using had been injected with a new, rather pleasing fragrance, which was far more attractive than some of the more synthetic creations. Since we moved into our house, my daughter Sophie also seemed to be busily entertained, which was extremely unusual and idiosyncratic behaviour for her. She was an energetic child that often demanded my undivided attention, but not any more. Something else was clearly entertaining her. It was all rather convenient for me, I hasten to say, because I could sit back on the couch with Gulliver, our ginger Tom, lying strewn across my stomach, like a very fat red scarf, keeping my belly lovely and warm, and his fur insulating me. He would purr profusely, sometimes pawing at my belly, as if he was playing with my unborn baby, which was rather amusing to watch. Well, it was until he started clawing my skin, leaving a few nasty scratches behind. I'd often hear my daughter Sophie, her tumbling laughter, echo around the high ceilings of the house, and it did get me wondering somewhat. I remember sitting up from my book, listening and thinking, I'd never heard my daughter laugh quite so much. She seemed unusually content to remain in her bedroom, playing with her dolls, something she'd normally not ever do. But these days her behaviour had changed significantly. Well, don't put her over there. Put her over there. Even my husband commented that my daughter seemed unusually happy. One day as my daughter is laughing, I swear I hear a woman's pretty ringing laughter as well. Now that did get my attention. Is there someone in the house playing with my daughter, I wonder? Now I am concerned. My protective maternal instincts rev up a notch or two. I was having a bad day. My whole body throbbed and ached. Everything was groaning, like an old shipping vessel that had seen better days. Yet despite my tired, very throbbing, aching legs and cumbersome swollen feet, I quickly dart up the long sweeping ornate staircase to my daughter's bedroom. I put my ear to the door and I listen in. My heart is fluttering. I'm sure I heard a woman's voice again. I'm sure I'm not mistaken.
Molly is going to have some tea. Would you like some too, Mrs. Pendlebrook? I've got the kettle on, and I make the best tea in Portland. You can have whatever flavour you like. I've got butterscotch, I've got candy floss. What would you like?
I swear I hear a woman's voice saying, "Butterscotch, please. That would be very nice." I quickly, very urgently pushed the door wide open. Did I really hear a woman's voice? Surely not. This is another effect of my pregnancy brain. It's another side effect. It has to be. What else could it be? Sophie is sitting on the floor with two of her dolls sitting up. Their four child's bright pink plastic miniature teacups and saucers arranged across the floor. A miniature kettle, plates, fake plastic cakes that have been placed onto the plastic plates. Sophie looks up at me excitedly.
Are you coming to tea, Mum? Would you like some bubblegum tea?
No, thank you, sweetheart, I say. Who's that you're talking to, sweetheart? I say, glancing around her bedroom. But beyond the open window, inviting in a cool breeze, so that the curtains dance backwards and forwards, there is nothing there but the pronounced smell of violets filling the air, and it smells stronger here than anywhere else in the house.
Mrs. Pendlebrook, says my daughter, she's come for tea as well today. She wants butterscotch. She doesn't know what candy floss is. Everyone else knows what candy floss is, don't they, Mum? I told her it's pink fluff on a stick that you eat at the circus. She says the circus of Prt1 has no candy floss. Can you imagine, Mummy, a circus with no candy floss?
Who's Mrs. Pendlebrook? I asked my daughter.
She's over there. Can't you see her?
Says my daughter, standing next to the cupboard.
Can't you see her, Mummy? She's smiling at you. She's my friend. She always plays with me.
Darling, there's nobody there. It's your imagination. You're making her up in your mind, dear.
No, I'm not, says my daughter, looking annoyed. Mrs. Pendlebrook owned the first house here before it was knocked down, but the house was built all over again. She said you did it very well. She says it better than it was before.
My daughter's startling revelations get my attention. I mean, as far as I know, me and my husband had never mentioned to our 4-year-old daughter that the original house had been knocked down and replaced. How could she possibly know that? I've changed my mind, sweetheart, I say, getting down onto the floor next to her. I think I'll have some of that tea you were offering me. I decide I need to find out more about this Mrs. Pembroke. Even though I can't see anyone in the room with us, I don't feel as if we're alone. The smell of violets is very prominent, and I feel as if somebody is watching me. So there we are. That's end of part 1. Tomorrow will be part 2, and don't miss it out because it's just the most fabulous story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.